Welcome. This week we're talking about video interviews, and I think I've covered it quite thoroughly. In prepping for this Q&A session, so there's loads to look forward to. But as usual, before I go into the meat of the session, let me run the intro. Okay, so as I said before, this week we are talking about video interviews. But before I go into it, if you are watching the replay, please go ahead and either like the page if you're on Facebook or subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube, so that the next time we post content, you will get a notification. If you are watching live, please feel free to share your questions. Just type in your questions into the comment box wherever you are. You will have to permit the software, to interact with you though, so that it will show up here and I can answer your questions. Okay, good. So let's go directly to the subject. Why is this important? Why is knowing how to ace video interviews important? It's important for many reasons. Thanks to COVID, right? Everybody has, we had to do virtually everything online, including, hiring and, conducting the selection process virtually. The use of video interviews has gone up significantly. In fact, I saw a stat that said 60% of hiring managers use video interviews. I know that certainly almost all the interviews I've conducted in the last year or so have been done virtually. So if you're really looking to land a role, you had better be equipped to ace video interviews, right? Well, and on the plus side, video interviews are 6 times faster than phone interviews. And there's something about seeing someone, right? Phone interviews are good. I use them also, especially for pre-screening. But there's something now that is so easy to do video interviews, is a lot more satisfying, right? If you can see the person, it's like meeting the person, right? You can put a face to the person. All right, now what are some of the biggest challenges? I did a search of opinions of other experts. I spoke to quite a few people who have done video interviews in the recent past. The biggest one is lack of preparation. Obviously, whether it's preparation for the interview itself or just preparation for succeeding in a virtual environment. The biggest one is lack of preparation. In fact, the more obvious one, funny enough, is lack of preparation for the actual interview. It's amazing, isn't it? I don't know what it is about being able to do a virtual interview that somehow gives people the impression that they don't have to prepare as much, right? But actually, you have to prepare just as much, even more, for a virtual interview than for a face-to-face interview. Either one, be prepared. And I'm going to talk about preparing for your interview extensively. The second biggest issue, obviously, would be technical glitches, issues with internet, especially for those of us in Nigeria. In sub-Saharan Africa, really, but I know that Nigerian issues include internet, electricity, also issues with the camera and other equipment, issues with noise and interruptions, right? So I'm going to just tackle each of these key areas one by one, right, as we go ahead in the conversation. So the very first one is, how do you prepare? How do you prepare for a virtual interview? Well, it's an interview whether it's being done virtually or in person. The standard preparation approach applies. So you've done you must do your research. It's assumed that you've done your research. You know the role, right? You're on top of the role. You study the JD. You know what the most important requirements are, right, for performance in that role, and you have thought through matching yourself to the role and situating yourself, into their own context so that you can show how well you can perform. You've researched the employer, what's their culture, what are the challenges they are looking to solve, right? Why are they hiring for this role? You've looked at the industry. I cannot, every time I talk about getting hired, like about 80%, right, of your success really is dependent on how well you can research, whether it's researching the problem, researching the employer, researching the networks. Research, very critical. Also, as I mentioned briefly before, not only have you done your research, you have matched yourself quite thoroughly to the job requirements, and you're able to demonstrate or to explain, right, how your skills and your strengths are uniquely matched to delivering optimal performance on the role that they are trying to fill. You've practiced your Q and A's, especially around the behavioral interview method. Your your star or your car, situation, task, action, results. You've prepared questions that you want to ask them. I always advise that one question you can and should ask as quickly as you can is, how will success be measured in this role? It helps you immediately tailor your content, tailor your responses to the most important aspects, right, of the role that they are looking at. Very importantly, overall, just remember that the interview, right, is simply a conversation between two interested parties to see whether there will be a fit or not. If you just think about it like that, you can then relax, right, and really go into that conversation looking to, make the most of it. So your aim in going into a virtual interview or a real life interview, well, they're both real life, a face-to-face interview, is you want to show your authentic self. You want to highlight your skills and strengths. You want to show them how you fit both the job and their organization. But you want to first, and as a matter of great priority, you want to build rapport and establish a connection, right? Now, the reason why a lot of people struggle in a virtual interview with this is because they're not in the same room with you. You tend to um struggle with the idea of, how do I build connection? Well, I mean, how would you build connection in person, right? First of all is the eye contact. So how do you accomplish that? You look directly into the camera, and I'll deal with it a little more, so that you are looking at them, right, and you're using your verbal and non-verbal cues to communicate engagement. So I'll talk about it a little later, your communication skills a little later, but let me just go to um, the next question, which would be, when you're preparing for a virtual interview, right? What's the technical stuff? Because that's a really huge point of entry. I have started by saying, especially for people in Nigeria, the internet is a major, the quality of the internet, right? I was interviewed, every time I've interviewed, especially, and the person is located, in Nigeria. I've also had the issue with a couple of other African countries. You keep having, glitches, it freezes. Sometimes people drop out and come back in. Now, you're not an ISP, so I mean, there's a limited amount of influence effect you can have on the internet connection. However, make the effort to, if you can, instead of just planning to do the interview on your phone using your normal internet connection, if you can use a MiFi instead of your phone connection, if you have a friend who you can find a corner in their office and do your interview, if you can arrange for alternative, so backup, if one provider fails, can you quickly switch over to another? Those are some of the ideas, right, you can consider, right, in trying to provide fail safe connectivity. So as much as possible, I advise that don't do it on your phone unless you are sure of your internet connection. But there are a few other reasons why I think it's better to plan to do your virtual interview using a PC and a webcam and a more robust internet connection. Right. So use your MiFi, test your connection very well beforehand, have backup plans in place. In terms of using a camera, so your standard camera and mic, right? That your standard camera might not be so great. So for instance, now in doing this broadcast, I'm using a webcam because the quality of the camera on my laptop isn't so good. If you can do that, if you can get a webcam and a laptop, fantastic. If you can't, and you must use your phone, right? The quality of camera and mic on a lot of higher end phones are fantastic, great. You want to consider um not you're of course you're not holding it like a selfie, so using a stand, right, so that like it's steady, but you don't need any special equipment like a mic or something to be ready, right, for your interview setup. Just use your PC and a webcam if you can. If you can't, if you're using your phone, put it on a stand. Right. And then the other thing is to consider using headphones um, because of noise cancellation, right? Because of better quality. Unless you've tested it, like I'm speaking now without any headphones, because I'm in a space where the noise levels are controlled, right? Um, then the other thing you want to consider is the conferencing app itself. Most people use either Zoom or GoToMeeting or free conference call, or there's the Google Hangout. I mean, there are loads of video conferencing tech in use. Whichever one it is, the recruiter would have sent you, the invite link. Make sure you go and don't. So these conferencing apps, typically you can use it on the web or you can download the app. Just download the app, please, right? It makes it easier and less likely to break. So make sure you've downloaded the app, you set up your account, you can log in, log out, you know how to mute yourself or mute yourself. If you are going to be sharing your screen, you've practiced that, you know, etc. Right? So download the app, practice using it so that you are comfortable using it. The other thing, in terms of internet connectivity and connecting onto a meeting, I find, right, because I mean, I usually connect from my laptop, that it makes sense to close all the other apps and all the other documents that you're using at the time you are going to go into the interview, so that all the power, for want of a better word, um, on your PC is concentrated on getting this thing done. So just one window, the window, just the app, just the conferencing app should be open, right? You should also, I find that my own laptop does this thing sometimes, of sometimes it takes a long time, right, to connect. So what I do before every virtual meeting is I clear my cache, I close down the window. Sometimes I start and restart so that it's at its highest performance point. I'm struggling for the technical words, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. In placing your camera, as I mentioned, you want to be building rapport. Rapport, a lot of it is in eye contact. You're not in the same room with them, right? But you kind of do what I'm doing now. Place your camera at eye level, right? And just focus on looking at it. You put it, directly at eye level. All right. So now, especially if your interview, I had the last but one of the interviews I conducted virtually. We were part of a panel. We were talking to these candidates. Of course, there were the usual issues of freezing, and if you're doing a virtual interview, because everybody understands the issues with technology, right? It's okay to, if you didn't hear a question, ask them to repeat it. Um, if the connection is particularly bad, you can acknowledge it, and so that everybody understands and you're moving through the conversation naturally. Think of it as if you're having a conversation with someone virtually and it freezes, right? When it unfreezes, you apologize and you go on. What happened in that one was, so we had these normal issues, but one particular candidate had a really horrible experience. He kept, his internet connection, I think he was doing it from his phone, it kept on dropping. Eventually it got to a point, so we're all there sitting down and twiddling our thumbs whilst waiting for him to try and reconnect. And it happened like 3 or 4 times. I mean, it really ruined the quality of the interview. Ultimately, it got to a point where he couldn't even log back in. Right. And so what we did was, okay, let's schedule another time towards the end. But even at that time, he couldn't connect. So, I mean, that was that for that job opportunity for him. Right. So, as much as possible, have your plan B and then think through, okay, so if for any reason my internet connection suddenly went off, will the recruiter consider continuing by phone? If possible, have that conversation of your plan B with them before the interview itself, starts. Okay, so that's the technical stuff. Above all, make sure you do your practice run, right? On the day of the interview, I tend to be paranoid. So in fact, I would even set up like 30 minutes before, do a dry run, and then just leave it there. All right, so let's go to the next stage. So I call it staging. That is setting up your backdrop and your environment, right, to perform optimally. The first and most obvious thing is, of course, you must find a quiet place where there's, minimal noise, um, and no interruptions. No one is barging in and out of the door, and interrupting the interview. Very important. Some people opt to interview in their cars. Okay, I mean, it's not something I would feel comfortable doing, but I've seen a couple of people successfully interview from their cars. If you must interview from your car, just park somewhere, not by a main road where people are driving past and walking past and there's hooting. Again, find a quiet place, a quiet location. All right. So um focus in a room. For instance, now it's currently raining where I am, but you won't know that because I've closed the windows, right, to minimize the noise of the wind and and the rain. So there's that. And then there's also, in terms of your background. So if you look at my backdrop, there's a wall, there's my bookshelf. I'm sure you've seen some people have like really elaborate setups. Great, fantastic if you can, deliberately set up. But as you're setting up, of course, you want to make sure your walls are not dirty because people can see your environment, right? You don't have a wardrobe or a cupboard full of things falling out of it. Make sure your background is properly prepped. Um, but whilst you're, setting up, you don't want to also distract people. Don't have a nude painting hanging right behind your head, for instance. I mean, that's an extreme example. But what you want to do is set it up so that your environment does not distract. You want them to focus on you and what you are saying. Now, in terms of sitting arrangements, one important thing that people should note, a lot of people think, oh, a lot of light, and then they go and sit, backing a window. Do not back a window or a light source. Whatever light source you're using should be in front of you, because when you are backing, sitting, backing the light source, the light overwhelms the camera and you look shadowy, right? So as much as possible, sit facing the camera, put your light source in front of you, sit in front of the window, for instance. Now, if you wear glasses like me and you're using a light, like I'm using a light now, but what I've done is I have moved the light, it's positioned far above my head and reflecting against the wall, because when I put it at eye level, the light reflects in my glasses. So make sure there are no reflections of your glasses or your jewelry, because it then disturbs the camera. You don't need to buy any special equipment, right? Make use of natural light, face the window, or use a normal, lamp, right? But remember what I said about positioning. Another important thing is, whether you're using your phone or your laptop, turn off your notifications. It's kind of awkward when in the middle of interview, your subscription to La Liga, your notification of your next La Liga match just pops up. It's a distraction. So make sure that you have turned off all notifications. And as I said before, close all windows, right? Except that the one that you want to use for the interview. All right, so that is it about staging. Let me move to the next thing. Let's talk about your dress code. As a rule of thumb, you should ask your recruiter what the dress code is. Also, in your investigating the company, researching the company, you would have gotten a sense of what it looks like. If you check their website, check what their style looks like, but ask outright, what's the dress code, and comply. Now, sometimes you may not have access to that information, in which case I usually default to business like, at the very minimum, so that if you show up, even if it's better to be overdressed than underdressed, in my opinion, right? So you can check the dress code, but also just default to business, or well, business casual, depending on the industry. So if it's the tech industry, you know that they generally dress business casual, so you can go with that. In fact, you would look extremely awkward if you showed up all in your suit and tie, for the more casual, the creative industries. But if you're interviewing for, say, financial institution, then you know that you have to show up in your tie and your suit, or in your suits. All right, so that's for asking for dress code. But most importantly, your dressing up is, yes, looks are very important, and people judge you by your looks, how you are put together. It's important, but even more important is how it makes you feel. You're dressing for them, but you're dressing for you as well. So make sure you're wearing something that you are very comfortable in, right? It matches the dress code, but it makes you feel confident and you are comfortable. In fact, I take it as far as, I use perfume. I recall one of these live broadcasts. I was, getting dressed for, to do a live broadcast. It was even on a Saturday. So I had dressed up, and then I was there spritzing perfume right behind my ears. And my daughter says, "Mommy, but they can't smell you. Why are you spraying perfume?" And I explained to her that it's how it makes me feel, right? Now, some people do that. You wear a suit and tie, right? And you're wearing boxer shorts and you're sitting down because, it's your top half that shows. Okay, fine. Maybe you can get away with it. But I always advocate to dress properly. You don't know. Camera might fall down and you have to stand up and pick it. And then next thing, they're looking at you want to eliminate any unnecessary gaffes if you can. So dress for success. Be comfortable. Do stuff that dress in a way that makes you feel confident. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I move on from dressing is also avoiding distractions, especially for us ladies, right? But even for guys, in terms of your colors. Now, when I I want to feel confident, I tend to favor very bright colors. But because you are dealing with other people and you don't want any unnecessary factors to enter into their evaluation, and everybody has biases into their evaluation of you, right? You just try and stay in the middle. If you are in an environment where you can get away with loud colors, by all means, right, knock yourself out. But I suspect maybe ladies can get away with it, but for a lot of people, if a man shows up in a red jacket, hmm, unless of course you're auditioning to act in a play or something, people might question it. um the point of what I'm trying to say is, remember that people have biases, right? And try and just you know not trigger anyone. So stay in the middle, wear something that makes you feel good, but also does not distract. For ladies, jewelry, loud jewelry, or bracelets that will um click against each other, make unnecessary noises. Right. Try and minimize those. And it's the same rule if you were interviewing in real life anyway. Now, let's talk about your both verbal and non-verbal communication. Same rules apply. You've hopefully you have thought through what your answers will be, right? So you want to try and be concise, try not to ramble, right? Now, I tend to gesticulate, as you see, as I've been talking to you a lot. Try and bring that on, under control um a bit more, because on camera, unnecessary movements, weaving in and out of the camera like this, sudden movements tend to cause a distraction. Just be prepared to really intensely focus for the duration of your interviews. All right. And again, I always say, when you're dressed, make sure that you check it in the camera, right, before you actually go live or you actually connect. How does it look before, so that if there are any like really obvious things, then you will deal with it before you go live. All right. So a few other things, right? In terms of how your non-verbal cues, relax, because when you're nervous, it comes through. Even though most interviewers these days understand that, and they try to calm you down, but I mean, you yourself go in, because if you're not relaxed, you won't be able to um show up at your best. Right now, something that happens, your webcam is essentially your interviewer, from point of view of building rapport and establishing a connection. Now, sometimes, especially if it's a panel interview, maybe only one interviewer will show their face. Sometimes they don't, but they will ask you to put on your own camera. It's okay. Just get comfortable with talking to your camera. Practice beforehand. Record yourself, play back, record yourself, play back. That way you get used to, talking on video. Right. Now, if in the course of the interview a technical glitch comes up, as I said, be honest, acknowledge it, and move on. Okay. Um, what other tips do I have? Yes, so remember that rule about it's your first 20 seconds. In fact, I think that it's your first 7 seconds that matter the most. And a lot of the time, they start with, tell us about yourself. Too many candidates, I've interviewed, say, well, I am male, I am I come from, they start to share information that is available on their CV. That's not how to answer that question. Remember that you just have a few seconds. So I usually recommend, and when I teach interviewing skills, I walk you through how to create your elevator pitch. A concise statement, 90 minutes, 2 minutes maximum, that tells them the most important things about you relative to their context and the position that you want them to know. So I mean, your first thing is you want to match yourself to the target position. I am a so and so specialist. I have this number of years experience in this particular function and industry, and here are my 1, 2, 3 key strengths. In my current role, I have achieved 1, 2, 3, and even further back in my career, I've led this, I've launched that, 3 huge accomplishments. Now, of course, to do with the role for which you're interviewing. I'm interested in this opportunity. Next, you address your reason for interest in their role, in the role, in their company, and your reason for wanting to live where you are currently. And you end your statement with, here's where I'm going in terms of my future focus. Typically, you want to align your future focus with where they are going to as an organization. So at the very minimum, have that ready. Now, I'm not saying cram. Be so comfortable, practiced in answering that question, that no matter what variation they bring it in, you're ready, to answer. When you take that approach, you answer the question like that, what you've done is you've set the stage, right? You've told them the most important things, and you've set the stage for a more meaningful interview experience. Okay, I think I've covered the most critical parts, right? So just to recap, prepare. Whether it's a virtual interview or in person, preparation is critical. I told you, you must research, you must practice over and over. And then take care of the tech. Have backup plans for your internet connection, right? Use the most robust options you can find. Have a backup plan. Discuss your plan B with the interviewer before they even start, so that in the event, oh, I forgot, electricity. So I mean, for a lot of people, if you're using your phone, maybe it might not matter, right? But depending on your source of internet connection, by default, I use a generator or a UPS for the duration of that time. So you're not worrying about power cuts and all that. If you can do that, that's fine. That's fantastic. Again, if you're doing it from your phone, then it might not matter so much. In which case, you make sure that your phone is like fully charged. I spoke to you about setting up staging, right? Setting up your environment in terms of minimizing noise, minimizing interruptions, the look and feel of your environment, so that you come across professional and the focus is on you. We've spoken about dress code, right? How you should look, checking with the recruiter first to match the dress code, and just business like attire, minimal distractions. Now, if you follow, and then we've spoken about establishing rapport, establishing eye contact, talking to your camera, treating the interview like a conversation, which is what it is anyway. And we also covered your first few seconds, right? Have your elevator pitch or your value statement, your value proposition ready, so that your your first answer, or first one or two answers, really really make that impression. Okay, so that's about the size of it. If you have any questions, please feel free to still put them in the comments. I come back to these videos from time to time and I answer questions. Remember on LinkedIn to follow me. Let me find my LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn, and feel free to send me your questions. I do these videos all the time. I'm happy to answer your questions. All right. Thank you for staying with me, and I will see you next week. Bye.